Okay, so I'm going to greet you from my hometown, KwaZulu-Natal, with Sanibona. I'm going to greet you with my new hometown of Gauteng, and that's Dumela. And lastly, I'm going to say Vanakkam to you because that is based on my Tamil religion or Hindu culture, and that is the language that we speak at home. I am married to someone who is from the northern side of India. That was 4 generations ago, and we have no idea except for the as the language was translated. Yes, namaste. Someone shouted it. Excellent. Namaste. Excellent. So you understand me, I understand you. You know, the most important thing that I experience now with the dancers in front of me is this vibe, this African energy. And I celebrate it all of my life. In fact, when someone comes to me and says, go back on your ship to India, I wonder, but that's not where I'm from. I'm 4 generations later here. This is my home. I have worked in communities at grassroots level. How can you direct me to a ship, to a home that I have no recollection of, except for 4 generations ago? And today, when I talk about Ubuntu, that value beats in my heart, as opposed to everything I've come to learn about in selflessness from my Indian heritage. And that is why I chose this as a topic today. So, for most of us, these past years have been tests of the deepest resolve, hasn't it? From waking up to the daily threats of illness, death, loss of families, even loss of income and livelihoods, we are also reeling from the shock of a destabilized state with corruption, looting, violence, and threats to social cohesion that has posed the most shattering disruption to our rainbow nation. This sharing of my heart with you today, I am reminded by the saying that the only thing guaranteed in this lifetime is that change is a constant, and isn't that true? Change is assured, and change is inevitable. As we move in search of the promised golden pot at the end of the rainbow, which for most of us is symbolic of peace, I want to point you to the golden nuggets that we, as South Africans of different cultures, are so fortunate to have as a guiding light. One being Ubuntu, and the other the Indian heritage of selflessness. And that to all of us that are sitting here today is the journey that I wish to invite you on with me as I share from my personal experience why my heart beats South African Ubuntu and my skin, but only for its outer appearance, transforms in selfless service from Indian heritage. I'd like to greet this beautiful program director who has shared with us all the values that I live by in terms of strengthening women. Over the years, I've actually come away from speaking women empowerment. It is more the equipment of what women have already inside. When I teach personal mastery programs, it's about reminding you that I don't have to empower you. You have the power. The only thing that I do is guide you, equip you with the skills to realize that power. And today, I want to go through what Ubuntu through COVID has taught me. That while we might all be practicing social distances, we do not need to distance ourselves from the very ideas Ubuntu teaches, and that is of empathy, generosity, and caring. In my life, the greatest praises have come from the communities that I have worked in, who have told me that I truly have that Ubuntu. In all of its attributes of hospitality, generosity, kindness, sharing, compassion, warmth, and caring, I understood from work at grassroots level what it means to need other people. That I am who I am because of who you are. And I thoroughly identified with the speaker, and perhaps it was from our generation that borrowing a cup of sugar was the norm. Hitting someone else's child and disciplining them, and especially now that I come and talk to you about court experience in children's court, where we have neighbors that are fighting each other for disciplining each other's children, never mind their own. We remember that it was done in the spirit of community, where people took care of each other, where the child was actually raised by everyone in that community. How I wish for those times, where we don't have to find children in rubbish bins, in sewage pipes, dead purely because they haven't been cared for. And that, sadly, is the background that I come from. These lessons that I'm sharing with you today, it doesn't come from the corporate boardrooms where I was a legal advisor, senior legal advisor, and all those titles. It doesn't come from chasing my pie in the sky of dreams of serving in international NGOs as a humanitarian. And it doesn't come as an acting magistrate in the children's court. They come from the lesson I learned when I put the values of my Indian heritage of selflessness first, accepting my heartbeat of Ubuntu. My life transformed with acceptance of that African heartbeat of believing in the connectedness of people from inside when I served without any title. When I transformed a back room at social services into a homework center to look after minors across different communities, engaging in addiction from as young as 7 years old, creating safe spaces for children, that heartbeat of Ubuntu that made me act as a vessel to promote the needs of women and children who are abused, neglected, beaten. Those same women who taught me the value of service and the passion to want a different life for children that were not their own children, realizing the mistakes they might have made in the rearing of their own children. How they showed up every day to that homework center to make food for the children that were neglected. How when again, my ego, the I-ness in all of us, it relented into a falsehood of wearing a hero's cape. And on one occasion, I believed I was there, I was doing what I was doing to save others. And boy, did I learn a lesson in the homework center one day. You see, I had to buy bread for that homework center. And being the person who I was, remember, I moved from a job as an acting magistrate in a children's court because I saw what was happening to the social workers in the community and the load that they had to bear. And I went to the social services and I said, I've worked with you for 7 years. It's almost as if I can start promoting you, getting money for your cause, creating programs for these children, for these women against gender-based violence. Give me a chance. That is what transformed my skin. This selflessness, not attached to any title. But when I went there as this hero. And I took out my credit card one day when we had no bread in the center. And I went towards the till because I was actually using all of my resources to run this homework center for children in Lawley, Lenasia, Orange Farm, whoever could come out close enough to me. And the women came from there too. And I went and I produced my card like this hero that I was, and my card was rejected. And I realized that the women that were cooking in that homework center, they said, Videshni, don't worry, we got this. And once I learned the lesson that I could never transform anybody if I operated from that level. And do you know, when I entered this international NGO and when I spoke to everyone from our African countries, the first thing that I learned that day is when you want to become a humanitarian, you must throw off that hero cape that we all desire to wear. And you must connect with the heartbeat of the people. And even if you don't understand the language, you can get taught the language. We can communicate beyond just the skin color. We can communicate on the common values and on the common goals that we have for children and women in this community. So, in terms of recognizing this value of Ubuntu, is that I am because we are, that a person is a person through other persons. We don't get that title of sharing from the heart when we wear those hero capes. Through Ubuntu, we show the value, the intrinsic value of being human beings, our worth, not for external marks. So what are those marks and those status symbols we all try to fill? It's around wealth, it's around status, it's around ambition, around race and creed. You know, you perceive the world in Ubuntu as one big human family, thriving on loving mutuality and interdependence. And above all, you was someone who cared so deeply for the well-being of others, not just for your own well-being, and where you go the extra mile for your extended human family. And we don't do this out of pity or charity, but out of a shared humanity. So my journey with the Hero Cape began some years ago when I wanted to serve communities in Lenasia and Loli. I went in, I became a channel of those that didn't have to those that were that had, because I was in the circles operating as a lawyer, living in all the northern suburbs, and I wanted to fill that gap. It is important to recognize that each one of us can act out of Ubuntu and reach out with love and empathy to those around us. We can walk towards our common humanity to pave the way for a far more empathetic future where we sincerely care for each other's well-being. I just want to profile a little bit of my personal journey to share with you, and it began in an environment just like today. Some years ago, I was invited by the Department of Social Development in a dialogue, like each one of you. And the social worker came up to the stage. She was working at the Department of Social Development, and she was going to deliver a talk on anti-drug. And this was to create awareness campaigns and also assist local communities to actually build local anti-drug action groups. And she stood on the stage, and when I looked at her, she looked so exhausted. You know, her face told the entire story before she even opened her mouth. And she told us about weeks ago when she saw a man drop a child outside this building, the Department of Social Development. And he said to them, take her, because I bought her in El Dorado Park at that time. I bought her for 30 Rand, and this was a 9-year-old child. And she was drenched in a substance from head to toe. And when they tested that substance, they found that it was 13 different samples of semen. How is it that each one of us, with the spirit of caring for children, cannot take that story to our heart? And I sat there and I looked at her as she said to us, she didn't even know how to go and sleep next to her husband that night. purely because, is this what our children in this country are subjected to? And I just drove with my passion. And I went and found out about how to create a local drug action committee, and I actually created one in one of those extensions in the Indian townships. I didn't live there, but I found out the information about how to do it. And I handed it over to the community. And this is what you should be inspired to do today. When we bring the facts of abuse and violence and gender-based violence and children that are suffering with molestation, and when we talk about how our heritage currently could possibly be destroyed, our humanity could possibly be destroyed, we must feel motivated enough inside to do something about this. So, when it came to looking at the work in the communities, I then later went and taught law to young academics like yourself. I used to present myself every day in front of a lecture hall, and we used to talk about human rights and the Constitution and wonderful things like that. But what saddened me so much is the thing that drew them to me is that I came from one of the largest law firms in the country. And I appeared like this very sexy lawyer who was earning money, and law was only about how I can become wealthy. And it saddened me because every lecture that I gave was about social justice, was about the Constitution, was about using your profession to actually make a difference, just like we were told earlier this morning by Patrick. And I thought so hard about whether I was making a difference to these youth lives. Later, when I saw they were following me on social media, as I so politely told our program director was only through Facebook, I realized that later they were celebrating my humanitarian journey. And I realized that every role we take, even this one today of me addressing you, is to address you so that we can fire within you the passion to make a difference, to change. Because what are we if we are without the cause and the spirit of each other? So years later, when I trained as an acting magistrate in the children's court, my heart broke when I saw the absolute breakdown of society was left in the hands of the younger social workers. You know, when we all go out on the first day after studying for whatever we need to, we dress up and we wear our briefcases and we're ready for whatever this job entails. I don't believe that any of those social workers got up that day to think that they had to deal with the 10 abandoned babies around the courtroom, where when they weren't even mothers themselves, they had to rock children to sleep, try to feed a bottle to a child, go and visit a baby in hospital that was so badly sexually abused that they needed almost debriefing within their first week. And I began to feel so guilty as an acting magistrate, and I thought, you know what? I don't think this path is for me. I want to go there and I want to ask for a job because I want to empower social workers. I want to give them that support that nobody is giving. So my journey has not been the well-defined journey of marvelous academic accolades in a university. It has been using this knowledge each time, wherever there was a space created to serve. And later, I actually took the lead. I got to create programs in social services. We were dealing with youngsters, young boys at 11-year-old that were raping each other in bathrooms. And this is the reality. Why? Because it is done to them. How do we stop gender-based violence if we do not start dealing it where it starts. I started something called the Stop It at the Start campaign. And I used all the tools I learned in personal mastery, and I created a program with another psychologist. And we started addressing gender-based violence with those young boys. And you know, it was so shocking for me when I asked them, is it okay to hit a woman? They said yes. I said, is it okay to hit a man? They said no. What does a woman teach you? How to go find another partner. What does a man teach you? How to smoke and drink. Because this is what is in our communities. This is what is there when we have no proper guidance. And then we all stand back and say, what went wrong? We look at how children, and we look in shock that children are 10 years old and falling pregnant. And then we wonder, how is it that they even know anything about sex? And it's purely because everything is acted out in front of them through social media. We need to become responsible adults. We need to take everything, every gift that we have inside of us, whether it is speaking on this platform, whether it is dancing, whether it is art, to make a platform for change. And you, all of the youth, is where it begins. So yes, at the end of the day, I got this fancy job at an international NGO. But my heartbeat remains with communities. I will do a disservice if I don't tell you about my Indian heritage. And for me, my Indian heritage is very much linked to what I learned about women in our country. And it is about the following of a beautiful goddess. You know, lots of people believe in my culture that we have tons of gods, you know, in Hinduism. But it's only because we have one God. We use different forms to worship that God. We worship God in the form of education as the mother goddess. And she is what teaches me about women equipping with power, knowledge. Are you able to hear me in the back there? Yes. You are? Okay, because this mic is faulty. I'll try with this one. Okay? So in terms of Indian culture, it's steeped in the values of dharma. That's the word we call it. It means duty. We talk about karma. I'm sure every one of you have heard about karma, but the practice of karma is not what goes around, comes around. It's about being selfless. Okay? It's the essence of selflessness. And then the one that Mahatma Gandhi made very popular was that of non-violence. So all the beautiful values espoused by the complex Indian philosophy of dharma are virtue, responsibility, uprightness, and justice. And of course, the beautiful value of ahimsa, as I told you about, Bai, who was termed the father of that Indian nation. However, when I revisit the quote shared as the topic for discussion today, all I am drawn to is the practice of this selflessness to transform this outer physical appearance, which I refer to as the skin, as opposed to the heart, to lead fundamentally one's own transformation of oneself. In this virtue of selflessness, Indian heritage explores fundamentally the selfless attitude with which one engages in service, duty, responsibility, interpreted by some as being the principal teaching in one of the holy scriptures called Bhagavad Gita. Karma holds that an individual's action should be motivated by the divine, by that power that exists in each of us, that divine power. It involves baser motivations such as material gain and incorporating a sense of self-sacrifice. It means selfless service to others, and it emphasizes the collective solidarity. It considers moral behavior a duty. It emphasizes collective solidarity and interpersonal responsibilities. We won't have children that will be abused. We won't have children murdered. We won't have women as victims of violence if we take on the responsibility to be more righteous as citizens, to become involved. The discipline needed to willingly sacrifice our needs for society has to be cultivated through this practice. It is particularly applicable in terms of doing one's duty selflessly, with composure for the benefit of others, without concern for social or material benefits. Can you imagine that? Giving up your all, giving up your livelihood to serve. You know what? I'm standing in front of you saying I did that. Consistent with transformational leadership, such as selfless leadership, can inspire people to exceed expectations of self-growth. Now, looking back at the 5 pillars of Ubuntu, like family, community, society, environment, and spirituality, how can we use them to construct a more disciplined, purposeful, and a fulfilled life for ourselves and benefit the world as we go about it? What we can and should do with the principles of Ubuntu and selflessness is introspect on what matters to us as individuals, what we do, and how it impacts society. During COVID and lockdown, most of us were pulled out of that busyness of life, imploring us to reflect on whether we are aware of our purpose, whether we are fulfilling it, or whether there is something else that we should be doing. You know, we almost hit the pause button to vet what we want to say yes to for future and what we want to say no to. And finally, we can decide what our new role can be. We saw the embodiment of Ubuntu in the father of our nation, and to me, he is my father. I met him on occasion. I'm so blessed to have sat with him, to have had tea and samosas with him. That's our very own Madiba. And he gave me this beautiful, beautiful piece that I treasure, written out almost as a prophecy to the kind of work that I will be engaged in. And he said, thank you, because he knew all of my family that were involved in all the anti-apartheid movements. And he prophesied this for me, that I will not just chase titles, but I will serve. And every time I look at him with his lengthy incarceration, it took nothing away from his humanity, but rather it shaped him into a person who had the power to shape the world around him with immense kindness and empathy. In the spirit of social cohesion between the beautiful virtuous practices espoused by Ubuntu and selflessness, we have the answers to building societal reform on a spirit of collaboration. Here, today, all of us, adapting our thought processes to this philosophy can help us build associations that will benefit our purpose and serve society in a manner that benefits everybody. No man is an island, and nothing is really accomplished alone. Our environment and our society shapes us from the beginning. In espousing the virtues of Ubuntu and selflessness, we can all belong as partners, participate as stakeholders,